The drought came first. It cracked the earth down to its bones and left cattle stiff and rotted on the edge of pasture fences. Then the wind followed, grinding grit into every crevice, until even the walls of the church peeled. By summer's end, the only thing still standing proud on that stretch of Wyoming was the Blackridge Ranch, miles from town and lonelier than any graveyard. Lainey Bell had not been born unlucky, but life liked her that way. Her mama died on a birthing bed in Casper when Lainey was 12, blood pooled around her skirts like ink. Her daddy drank himself stupid in the year that followed and ended up shot through the neck in a poker tent west of the Shoshone Range. That left Lainey alone, watching over her little sister Jin, while they scraped coin cleaning sheets and gutting chickens for a boarding house run by a woman with a wrist like a trap spring. By 17, Lainey was thin, plain, and quick with a knife when someone got too close. Jin, younger by 6 years, had the face folks softened for, and that was both a blessing and a risk. The men coming through saw her as something tender in a world of rust, and Lainey never let Jin walk home without a blade in her dress hem. Then came the fire. It took the boarding house in a scream of light and smoke, curling through the upstairs rooms like a judgment. Lainey dragged Jin out barefoot with cinders in her hair, and for 3 nights they slept under the ribs of a wind-torn barn. By the end of that week, Jin coughed red into her hands. There was no doctor in town worth the name, only a toothless man who sold opium and said prayers in German. Lainey traded her last silver ring for cough syrup that tasted of sawdust and ashes. Jin didn't stop coughing. On the morning of the 4th day, Lainey walked to the edge of town, turned east, and began the long road toward Blackridge. She'd heard of it only in mutters. 30 miles from anything, set in the hills where buzzards circled and old stone markers laned in the grass. Owned by a man no one called by his first name. Some said he was a war veteran turned cattle baron. Others swore he was a butcher from Missouri who fled west with blood under his nails. All agreed on one thing. He didn't hire girls and he didn't tolerate begging. Lainey walked anyway, sun blistering her shoulders, Jin's face pressed into her memory like a wound. By dusk, the fence line came into view. It ran for miles, ironwood posts sunk deep in the dirt, topped with wire like thorns. A single black horse stood in the field beyond, still as a monument. The ranch house was built from dark stone and heavy wood, its porch stretched wide beneath the weight of the sky. She crossed the last patch of dirt with her jaw locked tight, boots scuffed open at the toe. A figure stood at the far end of the porch, broad-shouldered and unmoving. He watched her approach like a man watching the weather turn. When she reached the base of the steps, she spoke with a voice scraped raw from walking. "Sir, I'll do anything, please let me serve you." The words weren't elegant, but they came from marrow. She held nothing back. There was no pride in her, only need. He didn't speak at first. He didn't move. The wind lifted the edge of his coat and stirred the dust behind her. Then he came down the steps slow, like he wanted her to hear each boot fall. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of a black hat, his mouth flat as slate. "You want to serve me," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "What are you offering?" "My hands, my back, my silence, whatever you ask." He studied her then. Not her face, but her stance, her worn fingers, the angle of her shoulders, the way she stood like someone waiting for the hit. Finally, he nodded once. "You work. You stay out of the house unless told. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't touch anything that's not yours. And if you lie, I'll send you back down the road with no shoes." "I don't lie," she said. He turned from her then. "We'll see." He walked toward the barn and she followed. She didn't look back once. The bunkhouse was spare, 4 cots, 1 stove, and the scent of hay, leather, and gun oil. The other hands didn't speak to her. 2 were Mexican men with long scars on their forearms. One was a white boy with a tremor in his left hand who watched her like she was a rattler waiting to strike. She took the cot nearest the stove, slept with her boots on, woke before the sun. The rancher, whose name she still hadn't been told, put her to work mucking stalls, feeding stock, repairing fence line where a storm had torn it to hell. He never said more than 10 words at a time, but he watched. By the second week, her shoulders bled under her shirt from the strain of lifting hay bales. She kept working. By the third week, one of the Mexican men left. No one said why. On the fourth, she was asked to ride out with the rancher to check water lines. It was the first time he gave her a horse, a dark bay gelding with a temperament like hers, quiet, tired, wary. She didn't ask questions. Just rode behind him, keeping pace. They didn't speak the whole way out. But when a wild dog startled a yearling calf from the brush and Laney drew her rifle without flinching, the rancher looked back at her once. That night she found her portion of meat doubled. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. Jin was still in her dreams, coughing, thin as paper. Laney would wake in the bunkhouse drenched in sweat, gripping the knife she kept under her blanket. She had not forgotten why she was there. Every breath she took was a bargain, time earned for Jin, a little longer, a little stronger. In the early days of winter, with frost biting the barn doors, the rancher called her by name for the first time. Laney. She looked up from where she'd been oiling tack, her hands stilled. You're going to Casper. You'll take my wagon. There's a man there you'll meet. He'll hand you a box. You don't ask what's in it. You don't open it. You bring it back. She nodded. He held her gaze for a second longer than needed. Then he tossed her the key to the lockbox welded to the wagon's underside. Leave at dawn. The ride to Casper was cold and gray. She wrapped herself in a coat that wasn't hers and kept a pistol on her hip. The man at the depot handed her the box with no words, eyes rimmed in red. She didn't look at it twice, loaded it and drove straight back. When she reached the ranch, the sun had dipped behind the hills. He stood at the gate. Anyone follow? No. You sure? I'm sure. He nodded. She passed him the box without question. He took it, opened it beside the barn door, and pulled out a single item, a child's medicine bottle, dark blue, with a white wax seal. He held it in his hand, weighing it. Who's Jin? Her throat caught. She didn't know he knew. My sister. You said you'd do anything. Was that the reason? Yes. He stared at the bottle for a long moment, then he handed it to her. Get on your horse, ride to her, give it to her yourself. She hesitated. She's in a barn outside Casper. North side, old stock house. I know the one, he said. Go. She didn't ask how he found out, she just rode. And when she returned 3 days later, dirt-caked and sleepless, he was waiting at the gate again. This time she said nothing. This time he said, You're one of mine now. And Laney, for the first time since her mother bled out on a bed of rags, believed she might not be alone. Winter thickened over the hills, iron gray and brutal. Snow came heavy and early that year, driving game into lower ground and icing the creek banks until horses broke through walking. The wind was a knife through cloth. Laney worked through it all, same as before, but now the rancher watched her differently, not softer, not kinder, but with the recognition you give a bloodhound that's proven it won't turn back from the scent. The others still said little. By now there were just 2 hands left in the bunkhouse, Joaquin, the older Mexican with a voice like gravel, and the boy with the twitch, Eli, who muttered to himself when he thought no one was listening. Laney didn't sleep much. When she did, it was light and always with the knife close. She did what she was told. Fixed broken gate latches, salted meat in the smokehouse, dug out a frozen pipe with her bare hands when the well cracked. She worked past frostbite, past blood, and never asked for anything. That was the key, never ask. The rancher only spoke when needed. He didn't ask her how Jin was. He didn't mention the medicine again. But sometimes, when the fire in the main house chimney burned past dusk, she saw his shadow pass the window. Alone. Then came the stranger. It was late January when he rode in, just before dusk, on a roan stallion speckled with ice. He was tall, with a waxed coat and a long-barreled Colt slung low on his hip. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just rode through the gate like he belonged. Laney spotted him from the east pasture, tightening the fence where a coyote had tried to get through. She dropped her hammer, wiped her hands, and started walking. The rancher met the rider at the porch. They exchanged no handshake. "You're early," the rancher said. The man nodded once. "Thought I'd see it for myself." "You bring what I asked for." "I did." "Then you'll stay one night." "Wasn't planning longer." Neither looked at Laney as she approached. She stayed silent. Later in the bunkhouse, Joaquin smoked a thin cigar and watched the flames in the stove. "That man," he said, "he's not law, but he's worse than law." Laney said nothing. "He's here to weigh the ranch, measure it like a butcher measures bone. You ever see buzzards circle before a thing is dead?" Laney nodded. "Then you understand." That night the stranger stayed in the main house. Laney slept with one eye open. By morning he was gone, but he'd left a note behind. And from the way the rancher read it, standing at the gate, jaw tight and pale in the dawn cold, it wasn't good news. That day the rancher called her into the barn. He didn't raise his voice, didn't meet her eye. Just said, "There's a family from Dakota coming in 4 days. They want the land, not the cattle, not the hands, just the water rights." "You selling?" she asked. He didn't answer. He was oiling his rifle, methodical. "I built this place with my own hands," he said instead. "But I built it on bones, my father's, my brother's. The war left nothing but dust in me, and this land soaked it up." Laney said, "So don't sell." He looked at her then, hard. "You think I've got a choice?" She didn't blink. "You always have a choice. Just depends what you're willing to bury." The family arrived 3 days later. They came in wagons, 2 men, 1 woman, and a boy no older than Jin. The woman had a pinched mouth and gold stitching on her gloves. The lead man wore a stovepipe hat and held contracts rolled tight in his fist. They dined in the house. Laney was told to bring wine, pour quiet, and keep her eyes down. She did, but she listened. "The valley's rich," the man was saying. "Your well alone could irrigate 4 townships. We'll bring in rail, build across the ridgeline." "I didn't build this place to be crossed," the rancher said, "and yet you wrote to us." "You put it in motion." The rancher didn't reply, just poured more whiskey. Later that night, Laney waited outside the barn, sharpening her blade on a whetstone. Joaquin found her there. "You thinking about using it?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Depends what happens tomorrow." He blew smoke toward the rafters. "You were born in the wrong era. You'd have done fine in the days when justice wore spurs." "Who says it does?" At dawn, she was up before the frost. The boy from the Dakota family wandered near the corral. Laney watched from the fence, silent. He looked too soft for this place, too smooth-faced. She knew his mother would pack him in linens and take him back east once the ink dried. She spat into the dirt. When she turned, the rancher was there. He said nothing at first, just handed her a slip of paper. It was a bank note, stamped, ink still wet. "Your sister, this'll buy what she needs, a home, a doctor. Even schooling, if you want." She stared at it, then at him. "I said I'd do anything. I didn't say I was done." He nodded once like he knew she'd say that. "I'm not asking you to go. I'm giving you the chance." She didn't take the note. "Not yet. Why are you selling?" she asked. "Because some men don't know how to die unless the world dies with them." "I'm not some men." He smiled then, just the barest flicker. No, you're something else. That night, the contract was supposed to be signed. The family dressed for supper, candles lit, wine uncorked, but the rancher didn't come, and neither did Laney. They found the contract burned in the stove, a single line carved into the dining table with a skinning knife. This land does not belong to you. No one saw the rancher for 2 days. When he returned, he had blood on his coat and a torn sleeve. No one asked, but the family left. Quiet, quick, and without a word. Laney saw them off from the porch. She didn't smile, she just watched until the wagons disappeared beyond the ridge. When she turned back, the rancher was beside her. "You broke the contract," she said. "I broke the habit of surrendering." She looked down at her hands, calloused, dirty. "Then let me stay." He didn't answer, he didn't need to. The gate stayed closed after that. And the girl who'd whispered, "Sir, I'll do anything," stood at his side when spring came, not as a servant, but as the one he trusted to kill if the world came back for what was his. The thaw came violent, like something breaking loose beneath the earth. Ice cracked from the troughs and the creek swelled fast, tearing through the underbrush with a sound like teeth grinding. Coyotes howled through the night, lean and wide-eyed, driven close by hunger. Laney didn't rest. Not now. The deal was broken, but debt still walked, and the man in the stovepipe hat hadn't come alone. 3 days after the family left, a rider was found strung to a fence post 10 miles south. His boots were missing. His face had been cut in the shape of a smile. The sheriff rode out to ask questions. He never rode back. The rancher knew what it meant. When he met Laney in the feed shed, he said only one word: war. She was already lacing her boots. They came not in a wave, but in trickles. Men with polished rifles and city-made coats. Men who didn't speak when they rode past the county line. Laney watched from the ridge, long-barreled Spencer tucked beneath her arm, mouth set hard. She learned their patterns, their numbers, the way they posted lookouts in the trees. They thought they were clever. They didn't know the hills the way she did. Didn't know that Blackridge had roots beneath the earth and eyes in every shadow. One night she crawled close enough to their fire to hear a name: Mercer, a man from Missouri. Hired gun turned land broker. His specialty was removal, quiet or loud. He once gutted a mare and blamed it on cattle thieves. Now he was here. That night, Laney returned to the ranch with blood on her cuffs and a map in her memory. The rancher was at the forge, shaping iron into traps. "How many?" he asked. 11, one main tent. They sleep in shifts. They think we're going to run." He looked at her, iron glowing between them. "Are we?" "No." Joaquin took the East Ridge with a single rifle and a sack of dynamite. Eli rode south to the timber line with a torch and 3 Molotovs stuffed in old saddle bags. Laney stayed with the rancher. Together they built a wall of flame. They waited until the second moonrise, when most of Mercer's men had settled into sleep or dice. The fire started low, just a brush spark. Then it bloomed like judgment across the dry hills. The mercenaries scrambled, half blind. That's when the bullets began to fall. Laney picked her shots slow and methodical. Through the eye, the throat, the thigh, she aimed to maim, not kill, make them scream, make them understand. By dawn, 6 were dead, 2 missing, 1 begging. The rancher dragged the last man behind the smokehouse. Laney didn't watch. She heard enough. When he returned, he wiped his hands on a cloth and said, "They'll send more." "Let them," she said. He looked at her, just looked, and for the first time she saw something break in him. Not weakness, not fear, but a kind of letting go. As if he'd finally accepted that the world wouldn't allow peace for men like him, for women like her. "We'll need more wire," he said. Spring rolled in with rain and thunder. The ground turned soft. New shoots rose from the graves they dug for the mercenaries. The fence got higher. Laney started patrolling the perimeter at night, knife strapped to her thigh, rifle in hand. She didn't need to be told. She belonged now. She could feel it in her ribs. She no longer asked about pay. One morning, Jin arrived at the gate. Older now, stronger, a little color in her cheeks. She wore boots that fit and a coat too big for her. She carried a satchel and a look Laney hadn't seen before, one of suspicion, of independence. The rancher met her outside. "She'll stay 2 days," Laney said. "She can stay longer." "She won't." Jin stepped forward, hugging Laney with awkward arms. "You look different," she said. "So do you." Neither said what they meant. Not really. That night Jin ate quietly at the table. She listened, she watched. The walls were heavy with rifles, the room dim with lantern light. She didn't ask about the blood stains by the back door. Before sleep, Laney walked her to the bunkhouse. Jin stopped her on the steps. "Is he your keeper?" she asked. "No." "Then what is he?" Laney thought for a moment. "He's the only man I've ever known who never touched what didn't belong to him." After Jin left, silence grew again. But Laney was changing. She was harder now, not just in muscle or reflex, but in thought. She read ledgers. She learned the cost of hay, of bullets, of whiskey barrels from the east. She started asking about water law. She read old contracts by lantern light, tracing the handwriting of dead men. The rancher watched her with a quiet gravity. "You're building something," he said once. "So are you," she replied. "We're both building things that'll outlast us. Then we're doing it right." One afternoon, Laney caught a man at the southern fence line. He wore a deputy's badge. It wasn't real. She put her boot on his wrist and asked who sent him. He lied. So she broke his nose. He told the truth. Mercer had regrouped, and this time he wasn't coming for the ranch. He was coming for the county. "They'll deputize thugs," the man said. "Take the title legal. Claim eminent domain." Laney let him crawl back to his horse. Then she returned to the house and told the rancher everything. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon. "We kill Mercer," he said. "No," she said. "We ruin him." He looked at her then. Saw it in her eyes. She wasn't the girl from the bottom of the stairs anymore. She was something sharper, something that burned slow, something he could follow into the dark. So they planned. They'd done war. Now they'd do something quieter. They'd follow paper. They'd flip his own men. They'd poison wells not with water, but rumor. Laney rode north to the old mining camps, talked to Union men with busted knuckles and old grudges. She came back with names. The rancher sent letters. Joaquin rode south, carrying promises. Eli disappeared for weeks. When he returned, he had deeds signed over from a banker who'd been missing 3 days. They were no longer defending a ranch. They were building a rebellion, 1 acre at a time. By summer, Mercer's name was a curse among men who used to fear him. A banker was found hanging in a smokehouse. A clerk's house burned down in his sleep. No one traced it to Blackridge. But everyone knew, and in the heart of it stood Laney, silent, steady, watching the wind across the valley like it belonged to her, because it did. July arrived in a furnace of heat. The plains crackled with dry grass, and the cattle swarmed the creek beds like ghosts thirsting at the edge of the world. Dust rose in curtains behind every horse. Men rode with handkerchiefs over their mouths and rifles tied to their saddles. Trouble moved like thunder, slow but certain. Laney spent her days riding perimeter, her nights sorting through deeds, ledgers, and shipping routes. She kept a journal now, tight, angular script no one else could read. Inside it were the names of every man tied to Mercer, every parcel of land bought with blood or bribery, every birth date, route, weakness. The rancher watched the change but didn't name it. She was no longer his servant. She hadn't been for a long time, but even he didn't yet understand what she was becoming. Not until she sent Joaquin east with 2 locked boxes, and when he returned, the county clerk's office had burned to its foundation and half the records had vanished into smoke. Mercer moved faster after that. He couldn't operate from the shadows anymore, so he came in daylight, with a dozen men wearing star badges they'd bought and polished like ornaments. They rode into the town of Creedmoor with government warrants and fire in their eyes, declared martial authority, called themselves the Creedmoor Restoration Committee. They seized farms, shot a preacher who wouldn't give up his well, hung a teenager from a cottonwood tree because he spit at their horses, and in the saloon Mercer sat with a whiskey and smiled. "Blackridge is next," he told the barkeep, "but it won't be by bullet. It'll be signatures." Laney heard before the sun rose. Eli came riding at full gallop through the gate, face streaked with sweat and blood. "They've got a judge," he gasped. "Fake one, traveling kind, they forged documents. Claim the land, been uninhabited for 5 years." The rancher took a long breath. "They mean to walk in and own it." Laney didn't flinch. "Then we take the pen from their hand." That night she rode alone to Creedmoor. Dressed not in rags, but in a dress cut sharp, gray wool, clean lines, her hair pulled back, boots polished. She entered the town hall at dusk, slipping past drunks and mercenaries too full of themselves to check names. Inside she found the judge. He was old. He stank of stale tobacco and smugness. His coat bore the seal of a state he'd never served. She laid the forged deed on his desk. A second one looked just like Mercer's. Only this one gave the entire Southern Valley to the Union Pacific Railroad. "Make your choice," she said. "Serve Mercer, die in obscurity. Serve the Union, and they'll name a goddamn town after you." The judge laughed. Until she laid down the ledger with Mercer's forged signatures, accounts of bribery, and the signed testimonies of 2 of his lieutenants who'd switched sides for immunity and whiskey. He stopped laughing. She walked out without another word. By morning, Creedmoor was swarming with Pinkerton agents dressed like travelers. Mercer fled south, and Laney returned to Blackridge without a scratch. The rancher met her at the barn. "What did you do?" he asked. "What you taught me." He shook his head slowly, almost in awe. "No, I never taught you this." She met his eyes. "I watched you." The Pinkertons didn't stay. They came for Mercer, not for order. By the time they left, half the county was broken open, but Blackridge stood untouched. Folks started coming again, men who'd lost land, women turned out by corrupt deputies, widows with nothing but sons and rifles. They came quiet, asking nothing, offering hands and silence. Laney let them build. A new bunkhouse went up. A second well dug, chickens, goats, a schoolhouse made from old barn wood. No one called it a town yet, but it had a name. Blackridge, and at the heart of it stood the house of stone, the porch still wide, the dust still hanging in the air like breath. The rancher grew quieter. He worked less, rode the fence lines alone. Stared out across the valley with a look that was half peace, half grief. Laney didn't press him. But one night near the fire he said, "When I was your age, I burned down a church in Arkansas because a man inside sold slaves to a Confederate captain. I didn't regret it, not even when I saw the bones." He drank, stared into the flames. "I thought building this place would put something right in me, but now I see I was just preparing it for someone who could finish what I never had the strength to start." Laney didn't answer. He looked at her, eyes tired. "You'll outlive me." "Yes." He nodded. "You'll protect this place." "I already am." That winter the rancher fell ill. It came slow, like rot in wood. He wouldn't stay in bed, but his cough grew deeper. His hands shook. Joaquin started riding in his place. Laney took over payroll, inventory, land negotiations. When the rancher could no longer hold a pen, she signed the ledgers for him. When he couldn't speak, she made the calls. And when he died, alone in his chair by the fire, she didn't weep. She buried him beneath the cottonwood tree where the first fence post had been driven. No priest, no cross, just a stone carved with one word, justice. After that, no one questioned who ran Blackridge. Laney kept to the same rules. No theft, no lies, no cowards. She took in orphans, runaways, broken things, taught them to shoot, to sow, to hold their ground. She taught them what the rancher had taught her. The world will take from you if you let it, so you never let it. One night, years later, a young girl showed up at the gate. Dirty, barefoot, ribs showing through her skin. Laney met her at the fence. The girl looked up, voice shaking. "Ma'am, I'll do anything. Please let me serve you." Laney didn't smile. She just opened the gate and said, "Then come inside. There's work to be done." The girl's name was May. She spoke like someone used to being struck, each word measured, flat, too careful. She wouldn't meet Laney's eyes, not at first, not for days. Laney gave her a cot in the tack room and a basin of water, same as she'd been given once. No promises, no praise. May scrubbed floors until her knuckles split, then asked for more work. She stitched tack, cleaned rifles, fed hogs, shoveled manure, and kept quiet through all of it. Laney didn't thank her. She just watched. Gauged the shape of her silence. By the second week, Laney gave her a blade, nothing fancy, a paring knife, handle wrapped in twine. May took it like it meant everything. That night she slept with it under her pillow. She was 13, maybe. Maybe younger, no papers, no kin. Came from somewhere east of Sheridan, from a place with walls but no shelter. Laney didn't ask details, didn't need to. She knew the look of a girl trying to outrun whatever her body had been sold to. There were dozens like her now. Blackridge had become a refuge no one advertised, a name spoken on the road like a question, followed by a prayer. People came ruined. Laney taught them to be useful, not gentle, not safe, but useful. 3 years passed, the valley changed with it, fields flourished. Water lines ran deep and clean, livestock tripled. The schoolhouse taught arithmetic by day and field surgery by night. The new bunkhouse held 30. There were stables and fences and a cold cellar for salted meat. No church, no jail, no mayor. Laney sat at the center of it all, her office inside the old stone house. She slept little, trusted few. Wrote everything by hand and stored it in a locked chest under the floor. She kept one photograph on the wall of the rancher, standing in the dusk, wind in his coat, watching something just beyond the frame. May became her shadow. Grew taller, leaner, faster, still quiet but no longer meek. She learned the pistol first, then the rifle. She could skin a deer in under 10 minutes and sew a wound shut with one hand. At 15, she patrolled the East Ridge alone. Laney gave her nothing but instruction, never comfort, never softness, but May didn't need it. She lived for orders, for structure. And buried somewhere deeper, for approval Laney never voiced, then came the telegram. Creedmoor burned to the ground, not by fire, by power. A mining company out of Denver had bought the rights beneath the town. Eminent domain again, the same game Mercer had tried. Only this time the resistance was older, smarter. They studied Blackridge, and they wanted Laney's help. The man who rode out to meet her was slick-shaven and sunburned, with ink-stained fingers and calluses that didn't belong on a banker. "Miss Bell," he said, "it's an honor." "It's Laney." "Then it's Laney. I've been sent to ask if Blackridge would consider joining the Free Western Union. We're consolidating homesteads, creating a legal bloc to fight federal seizure." "You want my land." "No, we want your name, your reputation, your rules. Blackridge is legend now. Your ledger's cleaner than any bank." She studied him, measured the lie behind his eyes. There was always one. "And if I say no?" He shrugged. "Then we'll respect it, but you'll stand alone again." She didn't answer, not then. That night May stood beside her on the porch. "You'll join them?" she asked. Laney chewed a blade of grass, eyes scanning the sky. "Maybe." "They'll use you. Everyone uses something." You just make sure you get more out of it than you lose. May nodded, eyes narrow. What do you want me to do? Nothing yet. 2 weeks later, two boys from the Union camp stole horses from Blackridge's lower corral. Laney rode out with May and brought them back alive, one with a broken nose, the other bleeding from his thigh. She tied them to a post at the center of the yard. The settlers watched, breath held. Laney raised her voice, not loud, not angry. Just final, this land feeds you, it shelters you. You steal from it, you steal from all of us. She looked to Joaquin, still tough in his old age, still loyal. Mark them. He stepped forward, dipped the hot brand in ash. Carved a single line down the boy's cheeks, not deep, not cruel, just enough to remember. Then she sent them back. May asked nothing, but the set of her jaw said she approved. The message was clear. Blackridge wasn't lawless. It had its own law, and Laney's name meant more than a badge. By autumn, the Free Western Union ratified its charter. Laney didn't attend the vote, but her signature was inked first. The others followed like sheep. From then on, wagons passing through the frontier bore her sigil, a black ridge line over a rising sun. She didn't smile when she saw it. She just locked the door, drew the map, and wrote the next set of names. But power has a cost. And someone always comes to collect. Late in October, Eli was ambushed on the North Trail, shot twice in the gut. He died before they could get him to the cellar. He was 19. He'd called her boss. He'd never once missed a patrol. Laney sat beside his body all night, didn't speak, didn't cry, just waited for the sun. Then she sent May. They found the killers, 4 men, all from the Denver syndicate, hired hands, lured west with coin and whiskey. One of them wore Eli's coat. May brought 3 back, the 4th she left for the buzzards. Laney didn't ask what she'd done to him, didn't need to. But later, when she passed May sharpening her blade, she said, "It doesn't get easier. You just get better at it." May looked up. "I don't want it to be easy." Laney nodded, then nothing more was said. That winter, the air hung with smoke and silence. Everyone braced for something. Creeks froze early. The cattle grew restless. New settlers arrived half-starved, half-frozen. Laney took them in. But every night she stood at the edge of the ridge, watching the line where trees met sky. She could feel it coming, not Mercer, not syndicates, something older, something heavier. A reckoning. She didn't fear it. She prepared, because she knew vengeance didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, and she would be ready to answer every one. By January, the wind stopped howling and started speaking. You could hear it move through the pines like a voice pressed through teeth. It warned of something no rifle could stop, something that came not on horseback or in a writ of law, but through the marrow of the land itself. The snows were late. The ground stayed dry and brittle. No one planted. No one hunted beyond the outer fence. It was as if even the animals knew Blackridge was holding its breath. Laney walked the grounds each morning before light. Coat heavy over her shoulders, revolver under her ribs. She'd given up sleeping more than 3 hours a night. Her desk was cluttered with letters unopened. Beneath it, a crate of ammunition waited, oil still wet on the cartridges. May stayed near, still thin, still sharp, now 17 and grim as the grave. She took charge of the patrols, read every report, sharpened every blade. The girl bled focus, but something in her was slipping. A quietness even Laney couldn't name. Then, in the dead of winter, a rider arrived from the western hills, coat torn, bleeding from the leg, voice broken. He'd come from a freehold 3 days west. Carried a single sentence in his mouth before he collapsed. "They're coming through the canyon." Laney lit every lantern, called every able hand to the longhouse. Maps were unrolled, routes traced in charcoal. She spoke low and clear, never raising her voice. "They want to take it with fire this time. No law, no deed, just force." The settlers listened, silent. Most were too young to remember Mercer, too new to have seen what she'd done to the last men who tried to take this place. "They'll come fast," she said. "They'll be hungry, armed, paid to kill. We won't stop all of them." She looked to Joaquin, then to May. "But we don't need to." The next week passed in preparation. Fences reinforced, cattle moved. Food stores buried beneath earth in locked cellars. Women took rifles. Boys carried messages in leather pouches tied to their wrists. Laney set traps in the ridges herself, spring-loaded, hidden beneath pine needles. She marked none of them. Trusted her memory. She dug one shallow grave beside the house, just one. When asked, she said it was in case. No one asked for who. It was near dusk when they came, not on horses, on wheels, armored wagons. Covered in tin sheets and scrap iron, wheels bound in chain, engines coughing black. There were men with rifles and firebombs. Some wore coats of war. Others wore badges stripped from corpses. They came in laughing. But by the time they reached the first ridge, half a dozen were already dead. The traps did their work. Gunfire cracked across the valley. Smoke curled. A horse screamed. The dirt drank greedily. Laney moved between cover like a ghost, rifle cold in her hands, picking targets without emotion. Shot one man through the eye while he was trying to light a torch. Another through the back while he pissed near the fence. May stayed high. A ridge sniper, quiet, steady. Her shots were measured and precise. When her rifle jammed, she drew blades and disappeared into the smoke. She did not return by nightfall. Laney searched the woods herself. Found two dead syndicate men with their throats cut clean. Then found May, leaning against a pine trunk, blood soaking her shirt, breath coming hard. Laney dropped beside her, pressed cloth to the wound. "You're not dying," she said. "I know," May whispered. "I wouldn't give them that." Laney didn't smile, didn't cry, just lifted her onto her back and carried her through ash and blood and splintered trees. By morning, half of the attacking force had scattered. Those who remained were hunted down. Not all were killed. Laney let one live, stripped him of his boots, marked his cheek with a hot nail, gave him water and said, "Tell them what you saw here." He rode off barefoot and broken. That spring no one challenged Blackridge. The canyon stayed empty. Traders returned. The schoolhouse reopened. Laney walked with a limp from where shrapnel had torn her thigh. May healed slower, quieter. She stayed in the house for weeks, reading ledger books and practicing reloads with her left hand. Then one morning she stood beside Laney on the porch and said, "I'm ready." "For what?" "To take your place one day." Laney looked at her. And for the first time in years, she nodded. Later, she walked to the cottonwood tree, the rancher's grave. She sat beside it, knees in the dirt. "They came again," she said, "and we bled again, but we didn't bend." The wind answered through the branches. She laid one bullet on the stone, a single, unfired round. "For next time," she said, because there would always be a next time, but now she wasn't alone. By the time the grass turned gold again, Blackridge had become more than a place. It was a mark on maps where roads didn't go, a name spoken in fear or reverence, depending on which side of a barrel a man stood. It drew people not because it promised safety, but because it offered something truer, justice that didn't wait for permission. Laney moved slower now. The limp from the shrapnel had never healed right, but she bore it without complaint. She still walked the ridge at dawn, still checked the traps, still signed every document by hand, but her shadow had shifted. May was 18 that spring, broad-shouldered, quiet-eyed, harder than steel. She wore a long coat like Laney once had, knives on her hips, rifles slung low. The people called her Miss Bell, even when Laney still breathed. No one corrected them. She earned it. New threats came, but smaller. Land agents who didn't step off their coaches, ranchers looking to form alliances, a preacher who tried to plant a cross outside the fence line. He was asked to leave before sundown. He did. Word spread that Blackridge had no gods, no masters, no mercy for those who came with gold or gospel, only purpose. That purpose shifted now. It became building. There were wells to deepen, windmills to raise. A second schoolhouse, then a third. The land was generous to those who served it. Crops took root. Children ran the fence lines with sticks for rifles. Blackridge had blood in its soil, but from it grew something hard and living. May oversaw patrols, set schedules, spoke less than Laney ever had, but when she did, people listened. She didn't bluff, she didn't repeat herself. And when a man once challenged her claim on a parcel near the northern creek, she broke his wrist, took his rifle, and gave him a horse to ride out. "You leave with your bones intact," she said. "That's mercy here." He rode and never returned. Laney watched all of it, the slow reshaping. Her name didn't appear on letters now. She left that to May. Instead, she kept the ledgers. And wrote a second book by hand in evenings when the wind was soft. A record, not for court, not for history, but for whoever would come after. She called it The Weight of Keeping. The first line read, "Service is not surrender. It is the discipline of power held steady." Jin visited again that summer. She wore a widow's dress and carried a boy at her hip, Laney's nephew, though she never called him that aloud. "I didn't come for help," Jin said. "We're getting by." Laney nodded. "You came to see it, what it's become." Jin looked at the stables, the barracks, the ridgelines still bristling with wire and iron. "I came to see if it was true, that you made something out of nothing." Laney didn't answer. The boy ran into the yard, chasing a dog. He tripped. A young girl helped him up, dusted off his shirt. Jin watched, mouth tight. "I wouldn't have survived what you did." "You don't know that," Laney said. "I do." They stood in silence. It wasn't cold. Before Jin left, she turned back once. "He'll need a place to learn, not just to read, but to know what to fight for." Laney pointed toward the third schoolhouse, under construction at the edge of the orchard. "Then you know where to send him." That fall, a storm rolled down from the mountains, black and full of rage. It snapped trees in half and stripped shingles off roofs. Crops were lost. 2 oxen died under fallen beams. Blackridge didn't break. The next morning, May stood knee-deep in mud, organizing crews before sunrise. Laney sat on the porch with a blanket and watched. May turned once, met her gaze, nodded. Laney nodded back. Nothing needed saying. A month later, Joaquin passed in his sleep. No pain, no fuss. He left a note under his pillow: "Keep your boots by the door, even when the world softens." They buried him by the cottonwood, next to the rancher. 2 stones now, both plain. May carved them herself. She used the same chisel Laney had once held. The day came when a girl arrived again, dust-caked, silent, maybe 12. A bruise across her cheek and a letter in her coat pocket. She didn't speak when May opened the gate, just stood there, hands shaking, staring at the land like it might disappear. May crouched to meet her eyes. "You willing to serve?" The girl nodded, tears already coming. May stepped aside. "Then come in. You'll earn your place." Laney watched from the porch. Her hands rested on her knees. She felt the wind lift the edge of her coat, same way it had all those years ago when she'd stood before the rancher and said, "Sir, I'll do anything." "Please let me serve you," she meant it then. And now, with all the fire and weight and blood behind her, she understood what she hadn't that day. It wasn't desperation that made her say those words. It was purpose. And in Blackridge, purpose outlived everyone. That night, Laney walked the ridge one last time. She passed the graves, the orchard, the creek still running clean. She watched May light the lantern at the gate, and she knew. It was no longer hers to carry. She built what needed building, buried what needed burying, taught what needed teaching. Now she could rest. And the girl who had once begged for the right to serve had become the name that others swore by when they needed something stronger than hope. They called it justice. They called it Blackridge, they called it hers.